And now, coming to you from our studios high in the northeast Georgia mountains, it's the Dangerous Skills Podcast, featuring compelling guests and conversation centered on faith, freedom, social evolution, and personal security. Be sure to listen closely, because if you miss out on the danger, you'll never learn the skills. And now, the most dangerous host in the digital space, Charles Powell.
And yes, thank you, Judy. Welcome to the Dangerous Skills Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Powell, and yes, she's right. I just might be the most dangerous host in the digital space. My guest today is Gary Burd. He's the founder and director of M-25, Mission M-25 Ministries, and I've known him for 21 years, and I'm really excited to have him with us today. You're going to find out an awful lot about how dangerous his side of the street is when we come back right after this message.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Bebop's Bakery and Bistro, located on Church Street in Royston, Georgia, has become a destination spot for vacationers traveling through the Peach State and locals alike. On the bakery side, they offer a wide variety of traditional and signature pastries, muffins, cupcakes, cookies, and dough. The last time I encountered red velvet carrot and cheesecake this good, it came from one of my favorite bakeries in Brooklyn Heights, New York. And yes, they do take special orders. Bebop's Bakery and Bistro, to love on people with food.
And we're back. Welcome back to the Dangerous Skills Podcast. I'm your host, Charles Powell. And our guest today is Gary Burd. He's the director, the founder of Mission M-25 Ministries. Gary, thank you for being here.
It's a real privilege to get to be here.
Well, thanks an awful lot. Well, I just want to begin. I just want to jump right in and tell me about your life in ministry before you founded the ministry.
You know, I was talking to a pastor last night, and they always seen me as a rebel. Even when I dressed with a suit and tie, and I carried the briefcase and squirted the foo-foo juice on and looked like and acted like what I thought the church wanted me to, I still had that rebel inside of me. I was still wanting to follow God, not follow man. And that whole scenario led me from my very first experience at the age of 16 of working outside the boundaries. And we filled up the largest churches in Oklahoma City with young people.
Wow.
And I was the president. And so he told me, he said, Gary, you were never a rebel without a cause, you know? And so I just kind of fit in what I felt like God wanted me to do. But I tried for a season to be what the church expected me to be.
Well, now, I like the word you use, rebel. The church is an institution. The church as a whole is an institution. And people that know me know I am usually quite a critic of all institutions. Institutions don't like the truth, and religious institutions like the truth least of all other institutions. So you were known to be a bit of a rebel. It's kind of a dangerous thing to be a rebel in an institution, isn't it?
It's not a comfortable place to live. You know, I had a psychologist analyze me one time, and he said, you have a war going on inside of you all the time. You want people to like you, but you're going to do what you feel like you got to do. And those two battle each other internally, and it's lived out in the flesh.
Well, I'll tell you, as much as you might think that that's a difficult and a terrible and a lonely place to be, almost every person who ever sits in that chair you're sitting in has the same thing going on for them.
Yeah.
What brought about the call to form Mission M-25?
Be real honest, I started reading the Bible. You know, our church had grown. We had over 800 members. We were blowing and going, had a great staff. They treated me very well. Back in those days, we had what we called armor bearers. They took care of me.
Briefcase toters.
Huh?
Briefcase toters.
Yeah. And so anyhow, I come to a point I was dying on the inside. The church was growing, people were happy, but I was dying on the inside. And I said, I want to be like Jesus. And I just started Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John and just diving into them. And God took me through a journey all the way. It took me 3 times to read Matthew, the first chapter, before I got what he was trying to get me. Those women in there. And the people that the church refused to embrace, that was who he put in his lineage. And it just started from there. And when I got over to Matthew, the 25th chapter, it said, if you don't feed the hungry, clothe the naked, and go to the prisons, you go to hell. That's what I read. And so I know the first time I went to a prison, here I've been in ministry all these years and never been in a prison. On the way down there, I was thinking, man, thank God it's an 8-hour motorcycle ride one way. I get out of the office and I get God off my back. I'm going to go to a prison. And I got down there and God just tore my heart out. And I learned at that point, Charles, that I never did anything unless I was broken for it, because the Bible says you can give your body to be burned, and if you don't have love, it means nothing. And so I don't do anything. I try my very best, Charles, never to do anything that my heart hadn't been broken for, because I want it to count.
I was reading one of the great Christian authors, it might have even been Spurgeon, that talked about how when God's going to do something important in a man's life, in a person's life, he breaks them first.
Got to break. And I did that underneath a bridge with a homeless guy. I did it in a prison with a young man that was mentally challenged, and they were abusing him every time he took a shower. God broke my heart there. God broke my heart at the Wounded Knee Massacre site for the Native American on Hokahay. I could just go through the list. A veteran. The reason I do so much for veterans, a guy who was a captain in the military, he pulled me down by the Vietnam Wall and he said, let me show you the demons I fight. And it was men that died. And I sat there or knelt there with him and wept. Those are the things that define my life now, is people who have broken my heart.
Well, now when God changes your heart, sometimes he changes your clothes. You want to tell me a little bit about, because he changed your clothes, but he might not have changed the clothes of the people around you.
Yeah, well, this is winter, and I've got my long sleeves on. But when I was in the 5th grade, I'm the only kid in class that don't have any sleeves in my shirt. I'm known around the country, I don't wear sleeves in. That kind of troubled the church, It troubled them. I'll never forget, I was a denominational leader, and I'd go into the meetings, and I'd wear my blue jeans, and they would say, well, man, I wish I could wear jeans. And I said, well, girl, what's that? Nobody's making you dress anyway. Dress the way you want to dress. And now I go back into those same meetings, I'll be dang if all of them ain't wearing jeans, And so, they took me to a place one time, and they wouldn't even let me put my motorcycle in there. And I told the leader, I said, quit taking us to places that I can't go.
Yeah.
It was very uncomfortable, not only for me, but for them. They didn't know, they could see something different, but they couldn't wrap their head around, how to embrace it without it messing up stuff. And it's just been a joy watching our institution, and it is an institution, but watching our institution come to the place that they're embracing us.
Yes,
now.
absolutely.
If I have a word for young people, it's be who God created you to be. One of the most dynamic things that's been spoken to me recently is I have the perfect DNA to do what God wants me to do. And that is so hard for us. But God put the correct grandfather, grandmothers, the correct mother and father. He went through all the problems to get my mother and father together to produce me, so that I could have the DNA that God wants me to have to do what I'm supposed to do. And just a little quick snip of that. My grandfather was a fist fighter. He'd go to town, he was a sharecropper, and they'd say, Dad, don't get in a fight. They'd ride in that old wagon behind that Poppin' Johnny. And they said within 15 minutes he'd be out in the street fighting. My dad was a fighter. I watched my dad, 5'7", 130 pounds, look at two men that were over 6 foot and tell them, if you'll walk out that street, I'll whoop you. And I'll drag you up and down this street. And if you'll bring that old lady you're married to, I'll whoop her too. And when he made me fight my first fight, you know, I mean, he made me fight that fight. He said, you're going to fight her or him, or I'm going to whoop you. And I knew my dad didn't know how to count. And I wasn't in for that. And inside of me broke loose a fight. And I can remember some years in my teenagers years where I just fist fought. Went to church camp, was in 3 fist fights the first 2 days. They didn't know what to do with me, but they tried to cast the fight out. It was in my DNA. Now I fight, but I fight with radical love. I fight with radical service.
Yes.
I fight with I fight with everything that is in me to make my kids have a better world than what they have today. Sorry, I went on a little tangent there.
No.
Man, that's what I'm about.
Okay, so you made the change. You know, your clothes changed and your mission changed. A lot of things changed. Can you remember a time, and I've heard you speak a number of times, but can you remember a time, I know you used to go hang out with a different crowd of people. You weren't hanging out at Bishop so-and-so's gathering. A lot of times you were hanging out with the local biker group or whatever. Can you remember a time that that the church folks might have said, well, he's just in a whole lot of danger, you know, so any dangerous situations you can relate?
Of course, one of the first ones that come to mind, I've been in several, but I can remember one of the first ones was the outlaw club that runs our area. I can't give those words out, but
sure.
The outlaw club that run our area, one of them had a bike rack, and my wife and I watched all the Christians sit on their bikes in wonder, and the two of us fired our bike and went up to the place where they were. And they had told me, people in the church and people in the Christian biker community told me, said, now listen, when you go into their shop, they had a motorcycle place at that time. They said, be sure and turn around and wave. The FBI is watching you. And so we went down, and I'll never forget, I'm standing in a half circle with the president here, and he had just gotten out of prison for stabbing a guy. And around, he goes, you go here, you go here, you go here. And he gets to me and he goes, and you, hey dude, would you go down there and tell him I need a trailer? And my wife's sitting over there, babying the man who his face looked like hamburger meat. He had slid down the road and just tore his face all up. And I told him, I said, hey, I have a cell phone. That was back before we all carried them. And I said, I can call 911. He said, dude, we don't call 911. We take care of the bike was probably hot. He was probably wanted. You know what I'm saying? And I walked into that clubhouse, and I had perfect peace. Yeah. But it scared the church. They didn't know how to take that. Oh, yeah. And over and over, I've been in places where I knew that if I went over this way, it would not be good. Over here, they were smoking dope, and I'd get high. You know, I knew this and I'd just stand in the middle, and watch God. One day, I was standing by a cigarette machine, drinking a Coca-Cola in a biker bar, and I could have swore that I was wearing a clerical collar because everybody started coming up confessing their sins to me. So, yeah, we've been in some places. It's great.
Well, I can understand that. I've had the same situation. You know, you would think going out and doing the good work, but I have also had federal alphabet organizations get involved in my life with regard to our work fighting human trafficking. Right. And you would think they'd be like, well, I'm just so excited about the work they're doing. But no, I don't get a whole lot of love from them. But I understand in a situation where I've been surrounded by traffickers in great danger, I mean, multinational, ethnic organized crime, you name it, surrounded by all that, but an absolute sense of peace of God to be where you're supposed to be in the moment. You know, it's never more dangerous. To me, it's more dangerous to be where you're not supposed to be, which could even be in the pulpit of a church you're not called to be at. It's more dangerous there than it would be to be wherever God's called you to be.
My wife tells them all the time, we believe we're in the safest place because we follow God. And we do believe our children will be blessed because we are doing that, which will bring blessings for 2 generations. And so absolutely living on that edge. Was something interesting. I heard a gentleman, Lee Grady, make a statement about how to finish well, and he did a good job. But the Lord spoke to me. I was going to share that, and the Lord spoke to me. He said, those were all defensive. I've called you to be on the offensive. The church plays defense. We live in defense. And that's why we've lost our country. We've built big churches. We've built multiple churches, but we've lost our country. And it's because we're playing defense. And the Lord's called me, and I believe he's calling the church, the body, to get outside those 4 walls and to play on the offense. And one of the first things he told me was, when you get old, I want to finish well, Charles. I'm 72, and I want to finish well. And that's what I was talking to him about. He said, first thing you got to do is quit playing risk management and continue to live a risky life. When I read the Bible, the men who finished well never stopped taking risk. And we get old and we stop taking the risk. You know, my kids, one of them looked at me one time. I do a diaper run. I go from coast to coast in less than 50 hours. We ride 23 hours, sleep 2 hours, and get up and ride another 23 or 24 hours on our motorcycles, raising baby diapers and baby wipes and cash for pro-life homes. Our families don't understand.
No.
The church don't understand.
Right.
People don't understand. But if we follow Jesus, he lived risk all the way to his death. Paul ran. His final act was running to his death. What I want to do, I want to slide into my grave, beat up, tore up, scratched up, wore out, and totally broke.
Not one more mile left on
Not
you.
one more mile left.
Yeah, I always have to tell my people when they're like worried about, they hear I came back from some rescue or whatever we've done. I have to always tell them I get better when worse comes along, I get better. Well, I'll tell you what, I want to ask you a very important question, but before I do that, let's go to a commercial, and we'll be right back after this message.
And now, a word from our sponsors.
Charles Powell spent 2 years of his life going undercover gaining intel on ethnic organized crime, street gangs, and foreign state sponsors, all profiting from human trafficking. These investigations, combined with groundbreaking research provided by Dylan Burrows, brought about their authoring the most essential book for those seeking a handle on human trafficking in the U.S. Not in My Town, Exposing and Ending Human Trafficking and Modern-Day Slavery. Where every individual can respond to the question of slavery with a resounding, Not in My Town.
And thank you very much, and welcome back. I am with Gary Burd, and he is the founder and the director of Mission M-25 Ministries. And I want to ask you what something means. Define something for us. Ballnam, what is that?
Well, it's something that the Lord gave me in 2005. I was headed to serve some veterans and on a mission called Run for the Wall.
Oh, yeah.
Motorcycle ride from California to Washington, D.C. Mm-hmm. We're riding to remember at that time, and we still do, the Vietnam veterans who were overlooked and forgotten. I'm not a veteran. I'm not a biker. I knew no one. And I'm sitting on the side of my bed trying to jack myself up. And I'm saying, Holy Spirit, you can help me with this, And as I'm praying, the Holy Spirit said, I want you to keep your mouth shut, just be a light. And I realized that the church never taught us to be a light. The church teaches us to be a mouth. And so I said, God, I don't even know how. And he said, just follow me. And I went to the check-in, and they gave me a little pin, and it had FNG on it. And I asked them, I said, what does this stand for? And they turned me around. The lady, Charles, literally took me by the coat and turned me around. And she said, oh, you're one of those, a Christian. She said, for you, it's the funny new guy. And it came out of the Vietnam War.
Oh, yeah.
And so I thought, okay, everybody laughed at me, and so I thought, okay. And I went in, I'd wrecked my bike. It's a long story. I'm all bandaged myself up. And I walked in, a guy in the back says, so you laid her down? Everybody laughed at me. And I walked out, and I said, God, so everybody just laughs at, is that the light? And I walked down and just started meeting people and let him lead me. And I was learning the lingo. I got to the first gas stop, and I told the guy, I said, hey, I need to buy you a tank of gas to say thank you from the church for your service to our country. He said, I don't need your money and I don't need your gas, but would you say a prayer for me? And I learned at that point what it was to be a light, to go out and hang around people and just look for places to listen to them. Don't be a mouth. The church goes out and answers questions they're not even asking. And if we just go out and be a light, smile, be happy, be genuinely interested in their lives and listen, not try to inject a story, but just listen to them. I'm not a veteran. I didn't have a story. And my weakness that I wasn't a veteran became my strength because I wasn't out there trying to compete with a story. I just listened to them and watch God bring healing and watch God deliver them from demons that haunted them by simply letting them talk to me. So now I just go out, I find ways to maybe feed them, maybe give them some diapers, but the most important thing I do is sit and listen. Be a light, not a mouth.
I like that. That's really good. A lot of people could learn from that. Okay, so we'll move on. I'll ask you a really, this question is difficult for a lot of people. A lot of ministers don't want to really face this, and those that might sometimes won't answer it honestly. But in the society and culture we're living in today, what is the church getting wrong? And what could we do different?
I woke up this morning asking God what He would have me to say on this program or this interview, whatever. And first and foremost, that lives in my heart is that we keep talking the talk, but not doing the walk. And we talk about the church has to be outside the four walls of the city or the church. I love Hebrews, the 13th chapter, the 13th verse in the Passage translation. It says, arise and go and follow me outside the religious walls. And then down at verse 16, it says, the thing that God honors and respects and blesses is you taking every opportunity to assist somebody that needs hope. Now, that's my paraphrase. I'm not quoting it. But that, to me, the church is, they try to obey God, but they want it in the confines of safety, security, where they never have to be vulnerable. And to me, the church is never going to get it right until they get outside the four walls. Charles, one of the greatest things that's happening in my journey right now is that I've lived 23 years, I believe it is exactly, outside the four walls. I try to live half my life outside the four walls of the church. I value the church. The church, we can't lose that footprint in America.
Right.
We've got to have it. I spend half my time there, and I try to spend half my time outside those four walls. The blessing is that the Lord has seen fit to give me a building where I can now train people. But He has given me a connection with a group called Christ Central Institute, where that we're training people to be community chaplains, how to live outside the four walls of the church, how to be a servant outside, not go out there and preach, not go out there, and we're not even there to meet all their needs. We're there to simply give hope. If you look at my patch, it says a ministry of hope. We want to give hope to a hopeless society. And the church is inside screaming about things when we should be outside embracing people that are hopeless, being a light, not a mouth, sit with them, and listen to them. An old Army chaplain, retired, told me one time, I said, man, I'm not a veteran. What do? He said, it's called the ministry of presence. Just go and sit with them. Mm. Just go and be there. We have chaplains now. One of them went to a mother that her son, teenage son, had just committed suicide. They had a professional chaplain come up, and he tried to give her words and got in his car and drove off. Our chaplain just sat there. And a little bit later, he sat there for 2.5 hours. And she finally reached over and put her head on his shoulder and just cried. Hope. My granddaughter, 16 years old when she done this, but they had told her the ministry of presence. And she said, Papa, there was a little girl in free camp. And she said she was troubled, causing us trouble. And she said, I just went and sat with her. She said, I miss lunch. I miss the activities. She said, Papa, I sat with her 4 hours without saying a word. And finally, a tear started running down her face. And she opened up and told me her story. Charles, relationships are not microwave. Care's not microwave. Takes time. And so if we as a church are going to save our country, it's not going to be with our pulpits. And it's not going to be in our private places of prayer. I preached yesterday, preached my little heart out. I prayed this morning. I believe in prayer. But until we take what we have been endowed with from on high, that power, and fellowship his sufferings, Philippians 3:10, I got to know him. I have got to experience his power, and I have to be out there suffering where he suffered. Arise and follow him outside the religious walls.
Wow. Well, I know that you have, and I didn't originally have this as a question to ask, but I know you have a strong relationship with the people of Israel and a strong relationship with the IDF. Now, I have a friend who is an IDF member. I shot with her at an event in Indianapolis, and when it was finished, I told her of the great love I had for the people of Israel and the IDF, and she took her flag patch off and gave it to me, and I put it over my heart on my plate carriers where I keep it. And so speak with us just a minute about what recently happened in Israel with the attacks by Hamas on the innocent women and children. And tell us about your relationships there, what you've heard, what you're hearing, what your feelings are about all of this, and where's God in it?
You know, I've taken motorcycles to Israel 3 times, and the last time I was there, we didn't take a motorcycle, but we took bandanas, and they have the soldiers' prayer in Hebrew that they pray on one side, and on the other side of it, we have Psalms 91 in English, and we've given probably around 2,500 of those away to IDF soldiers. And I know in 2011 when we went, they messaged us and said, we're holding on to that bandana. We're believing you're praying for us. And today, if you walk out and look at my motorcycle, you'll find one of those bandanas on my handlebars. When the attack happened, I reached out to my friends that I was close to in Israel. And they wrote back and they said, you know, it's our Pearl Harbor. It's our 9/11. And fortunately, all of those that have befriended are safe. Their children are on the war fronts. They're troubled. A very, very dear friend of mine named Maximilian Katz. He's a Romanian Jew. Grandparents was killed in the Holocaust. I rode across 10 countries with him of Europe. We left London and rode all the way to Jerusalem together. We've ridden from Santa Monica, California to Chicago on old Route 66 and then over to New York City. And when the synagogue was blown up in Pennsylvania in 2018, he and I lit the candles at Ground Zero for the Jews that were killed that day. I got a message from him today. And it was a video of the commander of the IDF. And there's great courage on their side that they're going to win this thing. They believe the days are dark, but we believe, I wrote them back, and the God of mercy and power is with them. And we're standing with Israel. When I did the ride across Europe, they had TV cameras on me biggest part of the time. And then we did several of these interviews, and they would always bait me and try to get me, are you going to blindly support Israel? You know, what if they do wrong? Are you still going to support them? You know, and I would look at them and I say, I'm not getting into your politics. What I'm doing is I'm getting into the Bible. And my Bible tells me if I bless Israel, I'll be blessed. And so I'm going to stand with Israel. I'm going to stand with the Jews. And today or tomorrow, I will pull off the side of the road and make a video to send to him of my support. I want the church to know if we get anything right, probably the only thing that's protecting America right now from the extreme judgment of God is the fact that we are still standing behind Israel. I can see some movement that's not comforting, but as long as we stand for Israel, I believe God will have mercy upon us. How God has not brought America under judgment for the innocent lives that have been destroyed through abortion, I don't know. Historically, God has always destroyed and rebuilt. And why he hasn't done that to us thus far, I don't know. The only thing that I can find is that we have stood with Israel. And so may God help us to continue to stand with them, continue to pray for them, encourage them during this horrible, horrible mess that's going on.
One more question. What would you say are helpful hints to people? What are the dangerous skills you've learned over this period of time when you have in the middle of your life changed your direction and you've learned and experienced, and you didn't necessarily just learn. I mean, you had wrecks, both in experience and literal wrecks on the motorcycle. It's not all been easy, but what are the dangerous skills? What are the things people can take away from your experience and they can learn about your life?
You know, one of the things that you have to truly believe that it's okay to die. I was in Montana, Yellowstone National Park. I was on Hokahay. My riding partner said, look over there, and there was a coyote walking by. And I zipped up in, it's 37 degrees, and I zipped up into my mummy bag, and I started thinking about that coyote. Then I got to thinking about bear, and I thought, wow, I could be a great taco here, you know. And the Lord said, you're afraid to die, aren't you? And I said, I think I am, God. He said, just lay down, we're going to deal with that. And God took away the fear of dying. And he took it away from my wife when we wrecked. We went airborne doing 70 miles an hour. And I told my kids I'd stay off my bike for 2 months, and I did. And then bike on. And my wife, when it came time, she jumped back on the bike, and she's with me. So fear, I think we got to get over the fear. America, fear was exposed through COVID. We acted like cowards instead of people that were saints. And so I think fear. I think the second one is humility. I used to be pretty brassy, and I've learned that humility is a very big key, but it has to be wrapped in the right package.
Right.
I faced an outlaw biker one time, and he jumped in my face. And I knew that if I backed down and acted meek, what the church thinks meek, if I acted that way, he would lose respect for me. And so when he took a step toward me, I took a step toward him. I've done that several times. Take a step toward him to let him know I'm not afraid. Don't confuse my humility with cowardness. Weakness. And so I took a step toward him. And the Christians that was with me were literally scared to death. They thought, oh my gosh, he's going to get cut. And then to allow humility at the right time, that kindness to come out of my mouth, to watch him melt. And he looked at me and he said, man, anytime you're back in this town, you need anything. He said, I got a sofa you can sleep on. He said, I got a trailer, I'll come and get you. If you need your bike fixed, I'll help you get it fixed. He said, I'm here for you, bro. But it wasn't because I was brassy and I was tough and I was mean. It was because I wasn't afraid, but I was humble. And I think the church creates a lot of cockiness and a lot of arrogance. I'm not afraid of the devil. I'll cast out. Bunch of bunk. We fold like a cheap suit when we get into the face of real stuff. Yeah. And so I think that those are the biggest things. I mean, I could make a list, but those are the biggest things to me, is walking humbly, giving mercy, seeking what's right. I think I read that in a book, that's the way I was supposed to live my life. And stand up for what's right. I know when I've stood, when they wanted us to do a marriage for two lesbians, and we told them, and one of them was an atheist, and we told him, we said, listen, sir, we've done everything we can to serve you, but we're not going to cross the line of what we believe. And when he looked at me, he's a Marine, a man's man, and he looked at me and he said, I would have been disappointed had you folded. They're looking for people who will stand, but stand with humility. And just a side note, that those two lesbians could have torn us up, called us names, and spread rumors about us. And there was 2,000, maybe 1,500 veterans on that run. And they could have blasted us. But we had 10 years, Charles, of giving them water and Gatorade. We had 10 years of going to the hospital with them when they had a wreck. We had 10 years of praying with them when they asked us to. We had 10 years of listening to their stories and crying with them. They knew we loved them. And you know the cool thing about it, Charles? 3 months later, I did a diaper run, and those two lesbians were standing on the street waiting for us to get there to give us diapers. We don't have to hurt people.
Right.
We don't have to. Not if we're humble and if we're kind, but stand for what's right.
Those are good words to end on, and I can hear the music playing. A humble, resolute, and righteous man, the most dangerous man of all. Thank you for watching the Dangerous Skills Podcast. I'm Charles Powell. We'll see you next time.
This has been the Dangerous Skills Podcast. End transmission.